Hello and welcome to Indie Comic Audio, episode number 5. Today we're talking to Russell Nohelty of Wannabe Press. That's right. In case you don't know who Russell Nohelty is, that basically means that you haven't talked to me about podcasts, and you haven't talked to me about publishing or marketing in general. It also means that you're probably not following my tweets, which is really a no-no, I suppose you could say. So right away, I'm just going to say, hey, go to Twitter, find me. It's really easy. I am at Indie Comic Ninja. If you basically just want to get tweets for whenever a podcast goes out, you can follow us at Indie Comic Audio. But anyway, hey, the reason why we're here is the interview with Russell Nohelty. This guy pretty much does it all. He is a publisher, a writer, a consultant, and a podcaster. He has 3 comic books out. Katrina Hates the Dead, also known as Katrina Hates Dead Shit. He also has a book called Ichabod Jones, Monster Hunter, and Gherkin Boy, The Search for the Dollar of Destiny. So anyway, this was a pretty good talk. It is maybe a little longer than the previous interviews I've done, but it is packed with information. The first half is primarily talking about his books. The second half is a lot of talking about his business operating a publishing company and consulting company. So if, listening here, it sounds good to you, I recommend you go check him out there on the internet. You can find him on Twitter and Instagram as Russell Nohelty. He also has Wannabe Press on both of those. You can go to wannabepress.com, businessofart.us, russellnohelty.com. He's on there everywhere, it seems like. So check our show notes. You can find all those links to his books, links to whatever else I can think of, or anything we mentioned in the interview. So yeah, just stick around for a couple seconds and find out some more about this gentleman operating Wannabe Press. But until then, I do have a couple of things to say. Just want to remind you to follow us on Twitter. That way you can find some cool Kickstarters to back, or basically just find out when the next episode is, which is generally really easy because I put an interview out the first Tuesday of each month, and possibly in between, and then kind of for a while, I might be putting out a couple of other podcast episodes that will be reviews or just the goofy off chance where I'll be reviewing or talking about a con like I did a couple months ago about SpringCon. But anyway, you can find us on Twitter. It's Indie Comic Ninja. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/IndieComicNinja. If all you really want to do is just get a single tweet every so often, basically the first Tuesday of each month, you can follow at Indie Comic Audio, and that basically will just tweet out whenever we have a podcast. So yeah, that's all I got for you. I just ask, hey, why don't you, if you enjoy the show, head over to iTunes if you have the chance, and give us a rating and a review. If you have any issues, I guess, I ask that you maybe email me about it instead, but do what you feel like you need to do. If you have any comics that you would like reviewed, you can email me at info@indiecomic.ninja. You, again, can find the show notes at indiecomic.audio/episode 5. That is the number 5. I believe that's all we got. So, thanks for listening, and here is Russell Nohelty. I guess start off mostly with just kind of saying what it is you do, because as far as I understand, you do a lot.
I used to do a lot of stuff. I used to have several companies and do a lot more entrepreneurship. but I really whittled it down to three main things. When I talk to people, I say I'm a publisher, a writer, and a consultant. So I am the publisher of Wannabe Press. I publish and write most of their titles. There are a couple of titles that we do a year right now that aren't written or drawn or anything by me. And we're trying to move in the direction where most stuff published by Wannabe Press is going to be other people's work. But right now, I publish and write almost everything that we do, mostly because I wanted to fail on my own work first. Mm-hmm. And whenever we go into another market, so when we do kids' books, which we do now, mm-hmm. and when we did novels, we're doing a new Kindle Scout book right now. So anytime we do any of that stuff, I always go first to lead the way and make sure that if anything screws up, it's on me, mm-hmm. not on one of my artists or writers. And then I also host the Business of Art podcast, which helps demystify business for artists. So I feel kind of like, not the prodigal son, but that's the best analogy that I have, where like I went out into the world, learn all about business, and then I come back and speak about it in creative because I also speak creative. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then I consult one-on-one with creatives trying to grow their business. And our strategy there is make great stuff, sell great stuff. So we go from how to make great content, how to sell great content, and how to build your brand.
Okay. And so that consulting, it's kind of newish because you're offering like a free consulting thing right now.
Yeah, it's pretty new. So last year, at the end of last year, I had started a membership site called Kickstarter University. Mm-hmm. And I branded myself sort of as a Kickstarter consultant, and that was a miserable, abject failure. It was just the worst. The only people that wanted it and saw the value in it were people who had already done a Kickstarter and didn't need it. Mm-hmm. So that was just terrible. I had recorded a bunch of videos. I had done everything wrong. If you listen to any other like entrepreneurship or business podcasts, like I would be a model of how not to start a company. So when that failed, I kind of regrouped. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, let's take the Kickstarter part out of it, because a lot of artists and creatives really do ask me a lot of business questions. But, you know, they would ask me, well, can I use this advice to start my own business? Or I'm going to launch a Kindle book, or, you know, I want to launch a Patreon, or, you know, some other business related questions, a lot of it about cons, because I'm very, very good at cons.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, let's flip this. And instead of being a Kickstarter consultant for everybody, let's just try and be like a business and creativity coach for artists and creative entrepreneurs. And that launched in about April, which is after we've had our podcast up for a few months, and it's gone much, much, much better than the membership site has.
Nice. That's good to hear. I know. I know. Or you put up those Kickstarter video podcasts, I guess, on your current podcast, or you put up some audio, I guess, from that Kickstarter University.
Yes, we did. We did the free Kickstarter course, which we still do. That's the thing that really pulled out of it, which is fantastic. Uh-huh. Not that all of the videos in the back end and all that stuff isn't fantastic, but the thing that really helps people quickly and gets us a bunch of leads and generates a lot of interest is the free Kickstarter course, which is a 7-day course on how to create, launch, and fund your Kickstarter. So we talk about validating your idea, how to find your business, how to find your perfect audience, when the best time of year to launch, and a bunch of other stuff that ends with how to take all of this information that you learned and build a business from it, which at this point is sort of where I come in. A lot of people that have done Kickstarters are like, well, what do I do now?
Yeah. So I know I think specifically those episodes on Kickstarter, the last Comic-Con I was at, I was just telling everyone about it. So I enjoyed them, and I don't even have a Kickstarter yet. So
well, that's when you're supposed to do the Kickstarter University. So this was the whole point, was you need to do it a year, 6 months to a year before. So people would say it was a year membership. And it wasn't cheap, but it was a year membership, and it was well worth it for what you paid for an entire year. Mm-hmm. And the point was, you need 6 months before your Kickstarter launches really to build your audience. Then the month the Kickstarter launches of like more intensive coaching and making sure you have, you know, you're tweaking everything. And then 3 months or 4 months after the Kickstarter. But most people that do Kickstarters are like, well, I'm going to do a Kickstarter next week. And I'm like, well, that's not good. You should not do that. You should for sure not do that. You don't have an audience for that. Have you even talked to people about it? And so many people are just like, no, Kickstarter's going to handle that. Like, I'm going to put it on there, and then magic is going to happen. I'm like, it doesn't work like that. And when I was doing Kickstarter University, this was the big issue, was people wouldn't understand that you need 6 months to launch. Most people understand you need 6 months to launch a company,
right,
or that it's a long-term strategy to build a business. But to build a specific Kickstarter, that's a very hard sell. And there's one thing I know in business is it's hard enough to make sure you're the person and to pitch yourself as the person who should handle a project. If you have to then convince them that the project is important and that the project exists and that this area exists, that's just too much stuff to get to before you actually can pitch yourself.
Right. Yeah, and I know with me, a lot of times I just, you get everything done. I'm sure that's what it's like getting a comic made, or at least close to being made, and you just get excited and you just want to get it out there kind of thing. But it's that waiting that really sucks.
Yeah, and you have to do actual work. Like, it's the work. The work only starts when you have great content. And that's what I tell people all the time. I'm like, hey, you have to have great content first, because if you don't have great content, then you're below everybody else. Everyone's got great content. If you want me to help you succeed, you have to have the great content too, which is actually something we just added into our program, because we used to just talk about selling your work.
Right.
And I found when I would tell people how to sell their work, they would have terrible work. And then they'd say, well, none of your strategies are working. And then I would say, because your content is garbage. I can drive content to your site. I mean, a trained monkey can drive traffic to your site if you have enough money. The trick is not driving the traffic. It's in getting them to take your desired action on the site. It's to retain them. It's to get them to sign up for your mailing list. It's to get them to sign up for your, strategy call, whatever that call to action is on your site. If you can't get them to perform that, it's because you don't have great content.
Right. So basically, you have 3 books out right now, personally?
Oh, I have way more than 3 books out, but I have 3 main books out.
Right.
So I have Ichabod Jones' Monster Hunter, which is our first book about a psychopath that escapes a mental asylum and becomes a monster hunter during the apocalypse. And then I have Katrina Hates Dead Shit, or Katrina Hates the Dead, depending on what version you get, which is about a girl who gets sick of living during the apocalypse, sets out to hell to kill the devil and end it once and for all. Since this is a comic show, I'll talk about the 3rd comic that I have, which is Gherkin Boy and the Dollar of Destiny activity book, which is a book that I write and draw, kind of an absurdist, zany, nihilistic book about a pickle that falls into a black hole and sets out on an adventure across the universe to get back home. Got some other stuff in there, kids' books and novels. Those are the 3 main major comic properties that I have.
Okay. So that's it's two books that have a lot to do, or really similar, with the apocalypse, and then Gherkin Boy is just kind of out there.
Here's the thing is, they're not intended to be about the apocalypse. They're very different in feel and tone. So when I pitch Ichabod, I don't even talk about the apocalypse anymore. I say it's about a psychopath that escapes a mental asylum and becomes a monster, but you never know if he's killing monstrous humans or it's all in his head the whole time.
Yeah.
The apocalypse is such a tiny part of that book. In fact, we only talk about it for maybe 2 or 3 pages at the beginning. But you're correct. When people talk about my books, they're like, oh, you're the apocalypse guy. I'm like, no, I'm the guy who has awesome characters and puts them in impossible situations. It just so happens that 2 of them happen to be apocalypse related.
Right. Which I guess, especially reading Ichabod, I never really thought about it as the apocalypse. It just, I mean, like you said, it was just a guy fighting monsters. And the whole time, man, that was very head trippy. I was questioning it the whole time, like whether or not it was in his head or not.
Thank you. People don't usually believe me when I say that.
Yeah, and I think I remembered you saying that, and just in the middle of reading it, I kind of, like, I needed to flip back and reread some things, and not in a bad way. It was very enjoyable. And it actually it reminded me a lot, too, of Johnny Homicidal Maniac.
Yeah, that's actually the one. If someone likes Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, I've made a sale before they even open it, because there's about a 90 to 100 to 95% correlation between people that like Johnny and our book. And it's not just because the style is the same.
Yeah.
It's because we used a lot of the same head trippy techniques. I like to say it's sort of like Johnny. Johnny has that very loose ink style.
Yeah.
So I just say it's like Johnny with tighter inks in color and tells a complete cogent story the entire time.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that I definitely appreciated about that story, and I feel like is a point that's missed a lot with comics, is that you had some really good character development, especially with Ichabod, because by the end of it, he's almost a different guy. Like he's kind of worked through some of his issues, and he really becomes a hero, and in a believable way. And I just feel like,
that's what.
Go on.
Sorry, go ahead. I mean, that's what we do. I mean, that's what comics can do so well.
Yeah,
is they can get you in a way that movies and TV can't. And I come from a movie and TV perspective. So this is the whole thing. Whole thing is how far can you how can you take a character from one point to another? And sort of the trick is just how much can a character change? And for me, like the more a character can change in a story, the better you've written it.
Yeah. Well, and the interesting thing with that, and I guess I don't know how much you want to give away with that story, but there's like the voice in his head, even like as a character, evolves through that story. Like
he does, because you learn that he's not necessarily the confident person that that you think that he was. In the beginning, he's very he's very dictatorial and very confident. And I think the same thing can be said about Katrina. Katrina's very confident in the beginning, but a lot of her character arc is understanding that maybe she doesn't know everything that she thinks that she knows. And with the Ichabod and the voice, which are the two main characters of the book, which is very hard in comics to have a main character of a book not ever appear in the book.
Yeah.
It was that they both needed to change, and you can't just have Ichabod change. You had to have how he perceived the world change, which, if you believe the dictum that he is all in his head the whole time, you have to believe that he's talking to himself.
Yeah.
And so it wouldn't make sense if the voice in his head didn't change. Like if he was the scared one and the voice, if he was sort of the scared one and his voice was his personality being the confident one, and they both sort of make this little bit of a swap throughout the course of the book. And like the voice has to become, if he's becoming more confident, the voice kind of has to become less confident just to make that believable. Otherwise, the audience wouldn't believe that, this was in his head. And you destroy one of the main tropes of the book, which is you never know if he's killing people, if he's killing monsters, or it's all in his head.
Right. Well, I feel like a lot of times, though, the way that split personality is handled, like in A Beautiful Mind, like the people that he sees are always there, and I feel like they never really changed, but he just kind of learns how to ignore them. But in this story, it is a separate character, whether or not it is a part of his personality. But I found that enjoyable, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
Thank you very much.
But yeah, and like you said, that whole book, every time they got into like a new situation, I was just like, how are they gonna get out of this one? And I enjoyed the way then that they got out of it. It was just, I don't know. I read it as one long story the way you gave it to me, and I don't know. Did you initially set that up as like separate issues? Or...
Well, here was the really hard part of the whole book was. Like, I know the truth of what happened, but I know what happened in the whole story, but the epilogue was the hardest to write, which is what brought the whole book together, because I did write it as one book, but then we broke it up into 4 issues when originally with Viper, but the epilogue was written for the trade specifically, and I had to go back, and there's a lot of stuff that happens. At one point, he gets swallowed by a slug monster, and say, how can this possibly not be just in his? How can this be in his head? Like, how could he be in reality during the apocalypse? And how could I make it real in the epilogue so that it feels like all of these possibilities were real, because I really think the epilogue is where you sort of are like, oh my God, this really could be all in his. He really could be in reality.
Yeah.
Like, I think until that point, even though I say it, the only real options for people are it's either in the apocalypse or it's in his head the whole time. But that epilogue really brings it like, oh my God, all of these things could have theoretically happened, and I had to land it with that to complete the whole story.
Yeah. No, and it was very enjoyable. So you do know, like in your head, you have a specific way that it actually is. You're not just leaving it up in the air to yourself, even.
Yeah, I was planning to do Ichabod, like many, many, many volumes of Ichabod.
Okay.
So I have a whole other. I know the whole story and like what the actual truth is.
Oh, nice.
But I'm never going to say anything.
Well, no, I'm not.
I'm never planning on going back now.
Okay, so you're not. Are you gonna actually write more then, or?
I have no intention of going back. Here's the thing: when I write these books,
yeah.
With Katrina also, I have other stories, but I want to tell complete stories.
Yeah.
That I have no plan of going back to, because when I write them, they're from a very specific part of my life and a very specific point. And basically, how I work is I write my neuroses and psychoses and boil up, and then I flush them out with a book. When I go back, it becomes very painful because I'm reliving that moment in my life that was very painful in and of itself. And not just the part of my life being very painful, but the actual writing is about a very specific part of my life in a very specific painful area of my life. So this is kind of where I bottle up my neuroses and keep them for good measure. And I can read them without reliving it. But even reading it gets easier over time, but it's very hard in the moment to have something like that and to feel and to go back and relive something like that.
Right.
I like flushing it out and then moving on. And that's not to say that obviously I retain the right to go back to Katrina in 10 years or Ichabod in 10 years and do more, as long as I can tell another complete story. And with Katrina, especially with Katrina, like there are 5 other very complete stories that I could tell with Katrina, which Katrina is the very beginning. So Katrina is 1 volume, which of itself, and then there are 2 other 3-volume sets.
Wow.
Which I could very easily do at some point because I have all of that flushed out, but I don't intend to do that because this is about as much a tribute to a point in my life and a place in my life as it is an awesome book in and of itself.
Right. Interesting. I guess then getting into Katrina, that book is heavily based in like some Christian myth or like mythos, I guess you could say. And I say that because you've extrapolated quite a bit on the Bible, because I mean there are things that would be considered blasphemous, I suppose.
Super blasphemous and sacrilegious. I'll tell you a funny story when you get done with your question about this book and the weirdest person and the weirdest thing I've ever been pitched to publish based on this book. Okay.
Well, I mean, so I guess saying what you just said about how both of these books are a time in your life, like, and even in Ichabod Jones, there's at the very beginning, the voice in his head says that he's an instrument of God or a weapon of God, something of God, and he has a Bible and he attacks a monster with it. So then, I guess, both these stories come from a very religious background?
From a lapsed Catholic background, for sure. My dad was my dad went to seminary to be a priest before he left. So we were a pretty religious household growing up. My mother's also from a deeply religious, like Italian heritage background. So I grew up with the Bible, and I grew up with in Sunday school till I was 13. And then when I was 13, my mom basically said, I have given you as much as is required of me of the Catholic faith. You are now have gotten your confirmation. You are now in the eyes of God an adult human being of full and you can do whatever you want now. And so the minute after that, I was like, well, I'm not going to church anymore. That place is fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so the rest of my life has kind of been dealing with that. In fact, all of my books, whether it's except for Gherkin Boy, which is very much like you said, just kind of alone. I wanted to draw a book and be a published artist so that when people said I can't do that, I said, well, I disagree with you because I'm a published artist and look at the quality of this work. So
yeah.
But all the other stuff, the major works that I've done have been revolved very heavily on religion.
Okay.
And I moved from Catholicism, and I did a lot of Buddhism. And if there was a thing called a practicing Taoist, I would probably be a practicing Taoist right now because I dig the way that like the Tao Te Ching was written and what they believe. But I did a lot of studying of Eastern religion and Western religion, and I went into doing Katrina because I always kind of felt bad for the devil. I mean, it kind of sucks to be him. I mean, let's say he was the guy, he did all the stuff, and let's just for a second, which is what Katrina posits, that this all happened. That there's God and heaven and hell, and Lucifer fought God and went to hell, right? That's a pretty shitty like punishment, right? I mean, he tried to have an uprising so that he could have free will like humanity, and like God just was like, nope, go down to this place that is fire, brimstone, and like you would be pissed too, right? Wouldn't you always be trying to escape if you were fucking in hell?
Yeah.
So like I feel kind of bad for the devil, and I didn't, and so I wanted to make this book that kind of posits like, is the devil the bad guy? Is God the good guy? And all of these I brought in not just Christianity, but a bunch of other religions. Basically, I took all of the stuff that I liked from other religions, mashed it all together, and made a book about it, which is all with my work. I always want things to be incredibly entertaining and then thought-provoking, but they always have to start with incredibly entertaining and then have like 5 or 6 levels underneath them.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you the quick story about the most ridiculous person. And I like he's a friend of mine, but he texted me one day and said, "Do you want to publish the Left Behind graphic novel?" And I was like, "The Left Behind graphic novel, the one about like the book that Katrina hates the dead is like mocking and lampooning for a whole like book, because that's sort of the basis, right? Left Behind, Left Behind series, right?
Yeah, it's
the one where like all the good boys and girls are raptured up to heaven, and like the people left behind. Yeah. So that's sort of what I like. Was like, well, that's the most ridiculous book ever written. And then like 3 years later, I published, or 4 years later, I published this book, and someone comes to me saying, "Do you want to publish a Left Behind series?"
So your answer was no.
The answer was, I think that this would be a bad fit for my audience and your audience. I don't think anybody would be happy if I published this book. Your audience would hate it. My audience would hate it.
I'm surprised that that's not already a comic, but yeah, whatever. So then getting into Gherkin Boy, is that just something you just made up off the top of your head, or is that a time of your life as well?
So that was a time of my life, but it's way easier to talk about that one, because that one was born out of the fact that I was in my old job before I left it. And I was doodling. I was a sales manager for a remote sales team in Texas, and so like most of my day would be spent listening to them on the phone and like critiquing them on the phone and making sure they didn't completely destroy the company. And so I would be doodling, and I'm not a good artist, but I'd kind of gotten into zines previously, which are they have a very wide range, if you're a zine head, of appropriate styles. I think it's a very polite way to say you can do anything in a zine. And so to write a comic book and to draw, I felt like I needed to draw a comic book. Like I needed to know what I was talking about more. I was training people on doing comic books. So comic books are not so much about what you can draw, it's what you can repeatedly draw. So at one point after work one day, I was like doodling, and I found this little like pickle thing, and I was like, I can draw that. I don't even have to draw that the same every time. It doesn't even have to be similar. And so I just started drawing. I had a 9x12 pad, and I just was like, I'm gonna fill this up with pages and see what happens. And so every time I needed a new character, I would figure out what I could draw. So with the first characters were sort of the pickle and a mushroom and a carrot. Those are pretty simple. A couple circles, and then a triangle, and then a fork. You can draw a fork pretty easily. And then buses are pretty easy. They're not cars, just no cars. But a bus is just sort of like, a half circle.
Yeah.
And then like potatoes and eyeballs and stars. Like these are things that are very easy to be drawn.
Yeah.
Or I would run out of, and I really couldn't come up with what would happen. Like there were star fights and things. I would just write a page, and that would be the page. It'd just be a written page of like comic to get me from one place to another. But it was mostly just because I really wanted to be a published artist, and I own a publishing company, and no one can tell me what I can't publish.
Yeah, no, it was definitely enjoyable. I think when I started reading it, I definitely thought it started getting really weird, and then it was getting to a point where I just kind of wasn't sure where it was going. I felt like it picked up, and it was like, I don't know. It was a story that ebbed and flowed, and I think it's interesting that you interrupt it with a lot of like fill in your own content type stuff. So it's like an adult coloring book almost.
Yeah, an activity book. We wanted to do something special when we printed it, because otherwise it's just a webcomic, right? So when we printed it, we wanted to do an activity book, and because it's not like even shaded, we were like, and it's a coloring book, I guess too. So we did like. But it was like absurdist pages. Like one of the pages was like color this page, but I didn't give you a key, and like some of the like some of the numbers were like 1,000,000, and another was like some sort of cat.
Yeah.
And then like the pages that was like draw the missing scene. It's like draw the missing scene or don't. I mean, it's your comic. Like you could draw a mongoose if you want to, I guess.
Yeah.
And like I Spy, where like there's no real point. Like you easily can, like all the stuff was already there.
Yeah.
So just kind of into this absurdism that I like.
And then when Zeus gets mad at you, you can draw your enemies for Zeus to smote.
Yeah, nice. I mean that was my favorite part was like I'm in that.
Yeah.
Book. So like at one point there's like a running joke where he said, and by the power of Zeus, they escape. And Zeus would always be like, "Don't bring me into this." and it happens like 3 times. But it's like I told you, and then like he sends lightning bolts and electrocutes me.
Yeah. And
then at the very end, there's like a thing where I start saying, "By the power of," and then I'm like, "Zularedo," and then Zeus at the bottom's like, "Very good. Yeah. Keep it that way."
One interesting thing I did notice was the mushroom and the carrot. I believe the way they talked was really interesting. Was that like where it's kind of like playing Mad Gab?
Yeah, the problem was it was a lot worse, but because they're the first characters that you see, I had to kind of make you understand that like this was intentional,
right?
Because otherwise, a lot of people when they first read it were like, "Do you know how to write?" This is the first like the second page that they're like completely like not speaking English. Yeah. They're adding pictures in with they're talking. So you really had to sort of make that where you're like, no, this is intentional, even though I wanted to push it way further beyond the boundary. If they were the 4th or 5th characters, they would be incomprehensible.
It's too bad. Oh well.
Next time. There's always next time.
Yeah, maybe that's a book that you should have a sequel for. Maybe not.
Or other books. You can do any sort of book. The thing is with Gherkin Boys, he lives a lower middle class existence for the rest of his life after it's done. So like there's no other. He's boring the rest of his life. So I kind of like cut the sequel out, but maybe they get their own sequel.
Yeah.
And you just are like incomprehensible gibberish, Gherkin Boy-esque spin-off book.
Yeah. I feel like I would enjoy just those 2 characters for an entire book. That would be pretty funny.
Well, you don't ever know that because remember the Minions? Like I thought I would enjoy them for a whole movie, and I couldn't stand them for 20 minutes.
That's a good point. Yeah, my son is 13 months old, and I don't know if I'm going to introduce him to the Minion movie or not.
And yeah, you gotta wait. You have like 4 years, and in like 4 years, he's going to determine what he likes, right? But until he starts school, like You get to
Oh,
determine what's like there, because like
yeah.
sometimes he'll come home when he's like what in first grade and be like, I want to watch the Minions. And you're like, how did you
Oh.
know about the Minions? But like if you introduce him at 13 months, that's on you. That's a
Yeah,
you.
no. And right now I think he's watched Star Trek. He dances to the Star Trek theme. Uh and some Mr. Rogers.
That's great. Yeah. My, my sister watches, I just home at my sister's house, and she watches like a baby network in the morning. And I was like, can I get that baby network? Because it's so soothing and calming. And I feel like it would be just the best network to watch when you're high. Just, they're like, and now let's count to 4. And you're like, I'm sitting there at 4 in the morning because I can never sleep.
uh
While she's like watching with my nephew and like 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm like, this is gonna put me to sleep. It's amazing. Can I get some of
Oh
this?
wow. That reminds me Homestar Runner they did like a fake children's episode or like little blurb with Homstar. Are you familiar with Homestar Runner?
Yes,
I feel like
home
you need to be.
style one up.
Yeah, and then there's the Homstar character that's like the goofier version of Homestar, and they gave him his own like children's show, and it was just absurd counting, and I didn't realize how true that actually was. That's funny.
Yeah, it's so crazy. Like I love my nephew,
Uh
but
huh.
I'm glad I don't have one of them. Because like I was tired listening to my mother
Uh huh.
talk about taking care of the baby.
Oh,
So
it's.
like that's my level of when I got tired in a day. And then the baby would come home and like it was all bedlam because he's in that level. You're probably gonna get to it soon. Where like he's like running throughout the house, but he doesn't know that like one misstep can send him down a flight of stairs to his
Oh,
doom.
yeah.
And like opening all of the things and like talking all of the things and like wanting food all of the times. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so tired. I have
Yeah.
such respect for someone that has a kid because, like, I'm tired literally the moment that I get up with no kids after 8 hours of sleep.
Yeah. No, and that's how I felt before a kid, and now that I have a kid, I kind of hate myself from back then because it's just like, what were you doing with your life? Because like now I find time to make a podcast. I didn't even have time for this a couple of years ago. I don't know
It's one
what.
of those things where it's like I have time now, so I'm like, I understand that time management so much better with a kid because I
Yeah,
have 3 minutes. I can make
exactly.
a podcast in 3 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. But that's also why I only put out one a month right now. So we're working our
That's good.
way up.
Well, you know what? One is better than none.
Exactly. Yeah. So hey, we just spent a lot more time talking about your books than I actually intended to, and I kind of wanted to get into the publishing and just kind of. I don't know if you necessarily want to talk about how that works, but I know I did a little survey on Twitter of what some creators, the kind of information that they wanted to know, and publishing. I think marketing was a big one. So I don't know. So just with publishing, you just said you're starting to get into and wanting to publish more, not you, so other people's work. So I guess how is it that you are personally looking for new creators to bring on board?
I don't want to publish your book. I don't want to
No.
publish anybody's book.
Oh, okay.
Here's the thing. Here's the issue is I want to show you how to publish your own book because
Okay.
if I publish the average across the industry
Mhm.
forever is publishers take 82%
Mhm.
of a book. So they take 82% and the author gets 17%. I think that's a little bit of a high number on the author side.
Mhm.
In my world, it's I take 90%, which means like you got to be really, 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 really wanting a publisher to give me 90% of your book. And
Right.
if you give me 90% of your book, then that's cool. I'll publish your book if it's awesome.
Mhm.
But I would rather show you how to do it because
Okay.
here's the secret is regardless of whether I publish it or you publish it, you're the one that's going to be selling it.
Right.
Like like there are people that I publish who are like, I don't want to deal with any of the shipping, warehousing, or anything. I don't want to put it on Amazon. I don't want to deal with any of that other headache, which is a big part. Like, I don't want to run the Kickstarter. I don't want to do like they don't want to do any of this stuff.
Mhm.
And so there are authors that I publish who are perfectly fine buying books from me at my cost, and then having me deal with the BS because they know that they're not going to sell books on Amazon. They know that really all they're going to do is sell books at shows, and they're perfectly happy to have me put my stuff on my publishing company. They buy 100 or 200 copies from me at a time, and then they do most of the work themselves at their shows like they're already doing, and then some of it trickles over to me. Like, okay. But generally, you're better off being your own publisher because this gets into more branding stuff, but because there are a couple of ways to brand yourself. There are a couple of ways to build a brand, which is the most important part because a brand speaks for you, right? Like, so the first is you are the brand. So Russell Nohelty would be the brand. That's the easiest way to brand yourself at the beginning, but it's also the worst in the long term because you can't exit your own company. You can't exit you. Trust me, I've been freaking trying to exit myself for decades. You can't exit yourself. Like if you're the face of the company, if it's all based on you, right, you can't exit. And so you can't sell a company and you're like, I would never want to sell it. Well, give it 10 years. I'm like, there's going to be a moment where you're like, man, I wonder how much my company's worth. The second one is the brand as the company. Now, I will say that regardless, you will always start with you being the brand. You and whatever other section are always going to be intrinsically linked at the beginning. It's the question of, do you want to branch out? So you're always going to have you and either the company as the brand, which is Wannabe Press. So I have a bunch of small pieces that are subservient to Wannabe Press being the brand. So there's no strong brand. There's nothing you can say. Russell Nohelty is Ichabod Jones Monster Hunter. He is synonymous with Katrina Hates the Dead. I am synonymous with all of that stuff, and thus, like Ford, where name 10 Ford cars. Like there's 100 of them. Who you're buying is the Ford brand. Right. You're not buying the Explorer brand. So that's the second way. And then the third way is your book or your cereal. If it's, your thing, your product is your brand. Right. And so for my buddy Bob Sally, who does Salvagers is his brand. He doesn't have a company. He has Salvagers is his brand. Spider-Man is a brand. Now Marvel kind of is on top of that, but for someone like Random House is a pretty weak brand, and all of their books are part of that overall brand. Whereas J.K. Rowling, her brand is Harry Potter. And Pottermore. Right. So you're always going to have yourself as the brand, at least at first, and then you grow into one of the other things. So if you allow me to publish your book and not you, you are foregoing the brand, the company as a brand. You're helping me build my brand. Thank you. You're giving me your audience. Thank you. I'm getting a stronger brand. I'm getting more of an audience. And you're getting some of my audience and some of my prestige, but it's not fair. Like, it's not equal. I am getting way more from this deal than you are. So not only that 90% that I'm getting, you're able to use my brand and get a little bit of my cachet, but I'm taking 90%, getting your IP, getting your audience, and helping build my brand. So I'm making out gangbusters in this deal. Whereas if you start your own thing and you start your own company, you're getting 100%, and you're learning all of the things that you should do as a publisher. Right. You're going to fail. Like, you'll fail a lot of stuff, but that's where my consulting and other people's consulting comes into it. Like, would you rather? So my consulting is $1,000 for a month, $3,000 for 6 months, or $5,000 for a year. By giving me your book, you're giving me way more than $1,000, and you're giving me and you're not learning the knowledge that you need to make sure you're not getting hosed. So when you're the publisher, You learn how to start your own company. You learn about the legal. You learn about how to build your logo. You learn how to go to shows. You learn what shows are important. And you can have better conversations with other creators who are self-publishing.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to publish, I highly recommend don't come to me. Either go to one of the top 5
Mm-hmm.
or go on your own. If you are going to self-publish, if you are going to go to a small press, make very sure that their audience and your audience aligns. So basically, make sure if you're doing a horror book,
Mm-hmm.
that the publisher does horror books, and not just horror books, but the kind of horror books that you want to do, because then you're getting a good deal by getting their audience. A lot of their audience will buy your books. The issue is a lot of people just want to publish. They don't care who they publish with. They just want the validation of being a published author.
Mm-hmm.
And to that, I say, get your own validation. We're not here to run a self-help group. Like, validate yourself, because you're going to make more money doing it that way.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to go to a small press, though, make dang sure that their interests and your interests align. I have friends that publish with companies that do things that that are not synonymous with who they are as a brand. I have one friend who has a all ages book, and his publisher is a Golden Age reprints Golden Age books. I have people that do horror books, and they're with fantasy companies. I'm like that. Like, your audience is what you're doing is helping a publisher open a new audience, which is great for the publisher. It's horrible for you because you're not going to get any sales from that. Now, the 3rd and 4th and 5th people will get sales from it, and you might tangentially get a little bit of that, but you're helping that publisher open a new brand. So if you have to do that, at least get a lot better deal than the publisher normally offers, because you are going to get way less than that publisher makes standard, because they're opening a new brand. If your thing aligns though perfectly, like if you're Devil's Due and you have something that's like Tales of Mystery, man, like that might be worth it, because Devil's Due is known as a horror publisher. They have a pretty active fan base, especially after their relaunch. Like I could see that working, because you're going to get a very high crossover with their fans and your fans, and they're going to mix. Your fans will maybe buy more Devil's Due stuff. Their fans will buy your stuff. It's going to be great. It could be a great marriage. So if you're going to go with a small press, make sure that it's the right small press for you, which for any publisher, for any person that's trying to publish, cuts out 90% of publishers right off the top. But don't be satisfied to just get published by anyone, unless maybe it's a Random House, Dark Horse, Image scenario.
Okay. So then maybe that's leading into how you present yourself as a company. I know you do a lot of Comic-Cons and other cons, and you have a pretty standard setup, and you, I don't know, pretty much do things very well, according to you.
I do things great.
Yes.
According to me. I don't think according to anybody. If anyone see me at a table, they would say, wow, that dude knows what he's doing, which is great, because I teach it. So I better know what I'm doing.
Yeah. And I think
No, go ahead.
Well, from what I've gleaned from listening to your podcast, I think the main difference that I have caught on for what you do, from what I've seen at cons, is that you have just a large variety, and so you're almost even like just a mini bookstore on a table.
I don't think that's it. I think the difference is that I actually engage with the people at a con.
Well, that's a big thing too, yes.
It is. The difference between me and almost everyone else is I don't just say hi, because that's like, you'll find some people. I say, hey, you want to see something cool? Hey, do you like comic books? Hey, something that I know my audience will engage with. I do these like weird doodles at my table, and I was at AwesomeCon. I said, do you want to see me draw something with my mouth? And I know that's the kind of weird shit my audience likes, right? So like, I know that if they laugh and come over, I'm probably going to make a sale. And shockingly, I made a sale almost every time someone came over and saw me draw something with my mouth. But those weird things are really, I think, what sets us apart, because I don't think that I have the variety that a lot of other publishers have. I think that I'm very focused on one market, which is really important if you're going to be a publisher, is to not have 50 books, to have a bunch of books that all speak to the same person, so that that person will come back again and again and again, because you'll never be Random House. You'll never be Image. You know, you'll be the guy who's great at making these psychologically subversive books, speaking to a very specific market of rebels and weirdos and creatives and, you know, anti-establishment people, which is the people that we target, people that, you know, don't want to be talked down to, that really don't want flowery language. They just want to be told how it is, you know, that can deal with, you know, the tough truths of life. Those are the people we speak to in my show and in my publishing company. So the books may seem like they're kind of across a broad spectrum, where like we have some sci-fi, we have some horror, we have some mystery, but in reality, they all speak to that same underlying psychological note. So if someone comes over, and if I know what I can say to lure over my audience, that audience is very likely going to buy one of my books, and they will very likely either buy 2 or 3 of my books at the same table, or they will come back the next time and buy a second book, or when my next launch, they will buy that as well.
Okay, and so then that leads into your pricing structure, I guess, as a main leading point for selling those books, because I know from hearing you before, you give deals basically for buying multiple books.
Oh, I love bundling. So here's the thing with when you do your pricing, when you price your book as a publisher, you're pricing assuming that your books are going to be bought by Amazon or some other book a distributor, and a distributor takes somewhere between 50 and 60%, which means when you price your book, you're doubling what you could potentially sell a book for. So any book, if you're like, I need to make $6 to make this book make sense, you're immediately going to say it's $12, because otherwise you're never going to make any money from any of your distributors. So when I go to shows, I say, well, I have X profit margin to work with. Now, it's a little bit different when you go to shows, because now that extra doubling pays for your table and your gas and all of that stuff. So it's not like it's completely when you buy it from my website. When you buy it from my website, that's like when I make the absolute most profit margin, because then I'm packaging it, I'm shipping it out, and all I'm paying is the hosting fee. But I'm paying for all of those other things as well, like the mailing list and all the other stuff that I do online. So at a show, I know that, let's say a book is $20, I have a $10 profit margin to wiggle at, and I'm going to use that to sell new customers who've never heard of me before, just like everyone else does. Whether it's a credit card company or a auto loan or all of that, whatever it is, they're giving you a discount for signing up at the beginning. They'll give you 3 months free if it's Audible. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to say, I'll take a $5 hit on my books if you sign up for my mailing list and you perform a couple of other actions, and in return you'll get the book. Because if I sell for $15, I've made $5, and I've gotten you on my mailing list, which is important, because those are people that are very likely to buy my next book and the book after that and the book after that. Usually what I'll do is I will say 1 book is 20 or 2 books is 30 or 3 books is 40. Anything on the table. Now, my goal is to get you to buy 1 copy of Ichabod, 1 of Katrina, and 1 of Gherkin Boy. And if you buy 3, generally that's the 3 you buy. But some people do take 2 copies of Ichabod. It's not my desired action, but now I've spent the same amount of time talking to that customer, and I've got them to spend $30 at my table instead of $20. Now, that's not as perfect as if I had sold them 2 for 40, but I am engaging with that one customer, and in the same 5-minute span I engage with them, I sold them $30 of books, which increases the cost of the sale at my table. It means I have to talk to less people to make my goal, or sell to less people to make my goal. Right. And on top of that, they are now on my mailing list, and they are an engaged consumer. And if they get, and I have this theory, which generally pans out, is if you can enjoy one world that I've made or that someone has made, it can be a fluke. There are people that I really like one thing they do and nothing else.
Yeah.
But if you can get them to like 2 books, well, 2 books is no longer a fluke. Now you're engaging. Now you're an author. Now you're someone that they enjoy. If you can get them to buy 3 books of yours and read those 3 books, and they enjoy those 3 books, they will probably buy everything you do for your rest of your career.
Yeah.
Now that has played out a lot of times. The more someone buys at my table, the next time they come back, they spend more at my table. The more likely they are to just say, "What do you have new?" and then just pick up all of that stuff. Because now you are no longer a fluke. Now you're doing now you've proven yourself as having great content and being a great content creator. They're also more likely to engage on your mailing list, on your social profiles, and be fans of all of those little mini launches between the time that you found them the first time and the second time. It also allows you to be more broad with what you offer. Like, it allows us to do novels. It allows us to do kids books because those people trust the brand, and even if it's not something that's 100% what they like, it is on brand enough for them to try it.
Right.
So that's how we do at our table. We do a lot of bundling because we want people to buy multiple books. And it's not because we want them to engage in a buying action, yes, but we want them to get involved in the long term. And I'm willing to give $5 or $10 off in the short term to make a customer for life in the long term.
Nice. So then I think that somehow that reminded me you have a book that you are currently publishing or is published that you're trying to get into the Kindle store.
Yeah. So again, like I said before, when we do something, we always do stuff with me first.
Right.
So it always starts with me before I open it up to other people. So Kindle Scout's something that I've been hearing a lot of people ask me to train them on. And so I wanted to try it. Basically, Kindle Scout is Kindle Press's way to find new talent.
Okay.
So you can put anything on there. They put it on for 30 days. 15 days after that, they will tell you whether they're going to publish your book or not. If they publish it, then everybody who nominated it, which is free to do, gets a free copy of your book.
Okay.
Everybody, and then you get $1,500.
Wow.
Now, that's not something for Wannabe Press. Like, that's something that you would get from Kindle Press. And they only take audio and ebook rights, which are things that I don't sell that much anyway. You still retain print rights, so I can still print my book in August or September through a Wannabe Press in the print division. But my theory is this. Kindle has a history of when they publish something, they push it hard.
Yeah.
So because I have some other stuff on my store, and they're going to push my book hard, the Spaceship Broken Need Repairs book, because they're going to push that book hard, all of my other ones should see a jump. So this is sort of a way, my whole job, I tell people, is to hack systems for people. And I don't mean hacking like computer systems, but like hack the systems of life. So I have a couple of books. They do okay on ebook, but not great. If I can have Kindle's resource to push all the rest of my books, then that will be fantastic. And then Kindle is pushing my book, and then all of my other books get a little bit of a boost from it. Well, now if I have 10 books, if I publish 10 more books for myself, all of them are going to get a boost because Kindle is boosting sort of the Spaceship Broken book.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if it's going to work. That's my theory that it's going to work, and that's why I'm trying it on myself first and being the guinea pig.
Yeah.
So that if it doesn't work, the worst case scenario, I go, yeah, that wasn't great. But if it does work, then I have that sort of that new tool, that new tool in my tool belt.
Right. I remember when you sent out an email yesterday or the day before about it, and I was really confused since you are a publisher. But that makes a
Yeah,
lot of sense.
but I am a writer, and I do, like I said,
Right.
I retain the rights to the print version of
Yeah.
the book.
That's
So,
nice.
and I just want to like, I'm gonna try anything. Like people always wonder why I have other publishers on my podcast and other like why I have a podcast to like promote other people's work, right? Like that
Mm-hmm.
seems weird. You're a publisher, you have your own books. Why bring on other artists and then send them to their site?
Mm-hmm.
And I get jazzed about the creative community. Like I want to help them. Like
Yeah.
I believe that the more stuff that you do and the more things that you can offer other people when they ask you for advice, the better you're going to do. Like even if it's not today, even if it's not a one-to-one exchange, all of that good karma that you come back that you put out
Mm-hmm.
comes back to you over the course. I saw that when I was in sales, I would help a client for 3 days and they would never buy,
Mm-hmm.
but then I would suddenly get like 30 like a huge commission from another client
Mm-hmm.
that I hadn't even talked to in months. Like, and just because I was like out there engaging and having good karma, the
Mm-hmm.
good karma came back to me. Even though, I think that most people expect that it's going to come immediately back from the person that you gave it to, but that's not
Right.
always the case. Like usually bad karma comes back and good karma comes back, and I spent a lot of years in the bad karma, like having bad stuff happen to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very interested in finally, it seems like, knock on wood, getting over a hump and having like these good things happen to me
Mm-hmm.
by helping other people out. And I got into doing this because I thought like other creatives were cool, right? I always wanted to have artist and writer and painter and sculptor and friend and publishing friends. And like if I can help them out and have a chat like this,
Mm-hmm.
once a week, then all the better for life. Like that just
Yeah.
makes me happy in life. And like doing the Kindle Scout thing, like I said, a lot of my friends had talked about it and a lot of clients had talked about it. And I was like, I have all of these other books in my back catalog that I haven't gotten out yet. Like the worst thing that happens is they say no, and then I put it up on August 1st anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I have a like I'm either going to publish it through Kindle on August 1st or I'm going to publish it through Wannabe Press on August 1st.
Mm-hmm.
So like either way, it's going to be out there on August 1st.
Right. Right. Well, and the thing too, especially about what you're doing, is interviewing those other publishers. Like I think it was last week you interviewed Devastator. And,
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're a humor press, and so I mean they're doing almost completely different things, but you're doing the same thing, and so it does lead to interesting conversation and helping each other out, and that's I think kind of why I like listening to your podcast. Is
Thank you so much. I think that it like because we both are publishers, we can
Uh-huh.
talk on a different. It's like two baseball players, like two professional baseball players or two professional podcasters. Like they just can talk about things in a way that like you just can if you're only one of you is doing that, right? Like I had Fan Base Press on last month, and they do very similar books to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, again, like it doesn't matter. Like all the more for them. Like you know what? If they get 500 new subscribers to their podcast and like I get 50, awesome. Like that's great because I'm building the cachet. They say in business, like a launch is withdrawing goodwill from the bank. So when you're not launching a book, you need to be putting in goodwill into the goodwill bank.
Right.
So because you're going to withdraw it when you're launching a project.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to put in a whole bunch so that when you withdraw it, you have enough to make your goal or, get people to help you out, to do interviews and do all of the stuff that helps you do a better launch. And so if I can help other people do launches while I'm just not launching, awesome. If I can help them sell more books, awesome, because that's just more and more deposits in the goodwill bank. And the more people that you help and the more, the more companies you help and the more podcasts you help, just the more things that you do to help people, the better you're going to be. I always tell my clients and everybody that asks, if I had to distill it down to one value to make yourself successful, it's to add value and tremendous value and incredible value before you ask for anything.
Mm-hmm.
So before you ask, you need to give 10 times the value to somebody else. If I'm asking for you to buy a $20 book, I need to give you $200 in value. Now, what that means, I can't tell you specifically what that means, whether it's, being a beta reader, whether it's doing interviews for other people, whether it's, having a podcast that interviews people, whether it's doing one-on-ones, whether it's liking people's comments on Facebook, whatever it is, you need to be providing that value well before you are ever asking for something, which is to go back to what we were talking about before, that 6 months before you launch a project. That's what you're doing. You're banking goodwill. You're banking it and banking it and banking it and banking it and providing value and providing information and providing help. And you're doing all of this and all of this and all of this, not sneakily. Like, everyone knows that you're going to ask for something in the future, right? I mean, that's how the world works. Yeah. Like, everyone's going to have a launch. They know you're a podcaster. They know you're a writer. They know you're an artist. They know that you have something you want to do. And eventually they will ask you, because most people in creativity and most people in life are nice. Like, eventually they're going to ask, like, what can I do for you now? How can I help you? And you can't do it expecting that they are going to help, right? Like, you can't do this thing where it's like, oh, I'm going to help you in exchange for you helping me.
Right.
You have to offer your services freely and help freely, and just expect that if they don't help, or that there will be help that comes back when it's time.
Yeah.
Even if they can't help personally. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's I know when I first started learning web programming, which is my main job, there was a book that I read that was like I can't remember what it was, but it was a book where the whole concept of marketing that they put out was just giving away things for free until you're able to make money, basically.
Right. And but the thing is most people give stuff away for free with no plan.
Yeah. So
they'll just give away tons of things and expect it to happen. There's a very, very, very tried and true method for, it's been around for years, and I don't know why more people don't use it. There's 4 steps. I mean, there's more, but I'm going to distill it down to 4 steps. The first is a free offer. Hey, well, when you go to my website and sign up for my mailing list, what do you get? You get a bunch of free comics. When you sign up for my podcast, what do you get? You get a bunch of, you get a free ebook about how to build your audience, something that's relevant to your audience, right?
Right.
And then you go through my email sequence chain, and the third and fourth, email have discounts for buying our ebook, and that is the tripwire offer. That is to get someone from a paying user, from a non-paying user and a free user, to a paying user. It is the hardest thing to do. The hardest thing to do is to get someone to spend $1 at your table. Someone spent, or in life, like, there's a lot of people that I'm sure also have free content from, and you don't buy from all of them. But once you buy from one, you're very, very likely to buy another thing from that person, unless it's horrendous, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, that's just the way that like book launches work. I mean, like, look at Kickstarter. Kickstarter is great. You can look at someone who's done 5 books and see their audience grows over time. Every single time they have a little bit more in their book, unless you're an idiot like me and do different, like, and then you do like a comic book, novel, children's book, like, and then you're all over the place. But generally, like, when I go back to doing comics again, which is my next Kickstarter, I'm hoping to be well ahead of where my last Kickstarter was for Katrina Hates Dead Shit. So then there's a tripwire offer, which is a $1 to $10 offer, depending on how much your other offers are. That just gets them to buy something.
Right.
After that is your core offer. This is your book or your course or whatever you're doing, your web page design, whatever it is. Maybe it's a free template, and then like a good widget for your tripwire offer, and then like a full website design, or like a better template, or a 1-page website design. And that's whatever your core offer is. And then a profit maximizer is the last one, which is, I'm going to consult with you one-on-one. So for me, the core offer is the book, and then like the consultation is the big profit maximizer one. Like, if you like me enough, like for Kickstarters, the book is the core, and then I have being drawn into the book is $250, generally a rendered image is 100. A special offer is a special thanks in the book is 50. So like those are profit maximizers. With the same person, I give them the option to buy on top of that. And these are like, this is what I'm talking about when I said before about I'm like the prodigal son and go out, and all these business things are available forever. And I don't know why more people don't model successful creatives that have already existed for a long time. I mean, think about McDonald's, right? Like if I was making a fast food chain, do you think a burger chain, do you think I would look at McDonald's and see what their pricing model is and kind of try and stick to that? Think I would like try and put my own spin on it though? Like maybe put myself around where a McDonald's is because there's people already looking for McDonald's there.
Yeah.
Like all of these things that people in business do without even thinking about it. Because of course, like if someone has spent billions of dollars in marketing, maybe trillions of dollars at this point in marketing, I'm going to see what they've done correctly, right?
Right.
Like I'm going to not like plagiarize it, but I'm going to take what they do and make it my own. Why do you think so many color schemes are red and yellow in burgers? Like, why are they all red? Why do they all have red and yellow in them? Well, maybe it's because McDonald's has red and yellow in them. So but when it comes to creativity or like building your own brand or building your own publishing company, there's none of this modeling. There's none of this. Well, what is successful? Like, how did these companies get successful? They just think that it's magic.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not magic. They may not know what they're doing necessarily, but like these are the principles that they're using. They're using Kickstarter to validate this idea, and they're going to shows. You know, shows are a huge part of making a band or making a hot sauce or making a burger company is doing these touring, these pop-up events. But as creators, people don't say, well, let's go to shows. Like they see shows as a burden instead of a necessity. Right. But go talk to a musician. Like they know if they want to get successful, they need to tour. They need to give stuff away. They need to like go out and like do these crappy shows to build an audience. Like that's how you build an audience, so that when you launch a CD, people will buy your CD.
Right.
You know, but when you talk about a lot of creatives, they're not doing these things that are general business tasks which work. And then they come and say, why aren't I making money? I'm like, well, of course you're not making money. Like, did you go and find 3 people that are doing it better than you and see how they're doing it? Like, did you see how often they're posting and like what kind of stuff they're posting about and like where their audience hangs out? Like, are you involved in their community at all? Like, are you going to shows? And they're all like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm like, oh, so you think that magically you're going to be the outlier? And this is a very hard thing to hear, but like, you're not a special snowflake. I'm sorry to say this, but like, you're not a special snowflake. I'm not a special snowflake. McDonald's isn't a special snowflake. Like, they hit most people that have had a successful can't launch a second successful company. So most people, like we talked about having one good brand, like most people have one good brand in business and can't launch a second one. So like they are not special snowflakes. They hit upon something that was wonderful in the moment that it needed to exist.
Right. So
it's better to validate the idea by looking at other people and what they're doing. It's better to do a small $500 Kickstarter before you do a $10,000 Kickstarter, because if you can go 500 to 1,000 to 2,000 to 5,000 to 10,000, your audience is going to follow you. That you'll just build an audience if you can get better and better and better and better books. You know, this is how Marvel does it. They put out issue 1, issue 2, issue 3, issue 4, issue 5, and they bind it in a trade, and they're happy to take a loss or break even on those single issues because they're going to make money on that trade. And by the time the trade hits, if it's worth doing, then they will have a big enough audience to buy that trade because it's built over time. But most people just want to get that $10,000 kick up front. I don't even know where this thing is going. I've been talking for like 5-10 minutes.
Yeah, it's kind of it's good information though. And honestly, I think we're maybe running out of time. So I know there's a bunch of places people can find you. What are your preferred places, or all of them?
And so okay.
And now you're cutting out, of course.
List. Sorry, my preferred one is to join my mailing list.
Yes.
It's number 1 at Wannabe Press or the Business of Art.
Okay.
or russellnohelty.com, which just launched like yesterday or today. If you want to find me on social, don't go on Facebook, because Facebook is dead to me.
I'm glad to hear that.
Instagram and Twitter at Russell Nohelty or at Wannabe Press, but really at Russell Nohelty. I've kind of like abandoned the Wannabe Press Twitter and Instagram pages.
Why is that? Just personal?
Because so I do this weird thing, which is I draw these weird pictures for Instagram, and I like put very nihilistic and like inappropriate things in these like pictures of like ducks and stuff, and like koala bears saying, like a worm saying "I'll eat you one day." These things are like not really appropriate for like the Wannabe Press audience. Like I still talk to that, and I still like post stuff sometimes, but like the ones that I'm really building, because like we said at the beginning, your brand is going to be your company's brand at the beginning. Whereas like if I make a big brand for myself, I can funnel it into like the Wannabe Press brand. But like I couldn't do 3 or 4 accounts. Like you just can't. You got to focus on what works. And what I did is I created a bunch of, and I found which ones like people responded to, and I focused on them, because you only have so many hours in a day, as I know you know too well.
Yes.
So Instagram, Twitter, my mailing list are the 3 big ones.
Okay. Maybe that's a good spot to end.
Yeah. Just remember one more thing. Life is long. Life is long. There's plenty of time to do all of the things. It's so long. Like people think it's short, but like it's real long. Yeah. Like some days I go to bed and I'm like, that all happened today. And so like an hour is a lot of time. A day is a lot of time. A week's a lot of time. And the little amount of time that you spend doing things really adds up over a long enough time horizon.
Right. And I think the thing about that too is, you have to remember, my brother just said this to me the other day, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is today.
Oh, I love that quote. That's a great quote. It's one of my favorite. And you know what? If you do a podcast a month, in 4 years, you'll have 50 podcasts, and you'll be way ahead of if you had started that same podcast 2 years from now. And I guarantee you, in 4 years, you won't be doing it once a month.
Oh, no.
You'll be doing it once a week, right?
I have plans to start doing some other, maybe interviews once a month, and then some reviews once a month, and maybe build in some other like concepts and themes. But yeah, no, it'll at least get to twice a month, hopefully within the next year. And then
that's perfect. And that's perfect because you're doing what everyone should do. You started small, you mastered the thing, and then you added more things, because it takes a long time to learn a thing at first. Like it took me a long time to learn this podcast the first time I did it. Yeah. But now I can do 2 or even 3 episodes like blinking, because I know the structure, I know the equipment, I don't have to research the equipment. And so or when I did social media, like I learned Facebook, and then until the point that I could do Facebook in 20 minutes if I needed to. Then I took all day to learn Twitter, and now I can do Twitter in 20 minutes. And then like you don't have to do it all at once, but you have to do something.
Right. And I think the other thing that popped in my head when you said that life is long is that I know a lot of famous people really didn't hit their strides or even their famousness until really late. Like I think J.K. Rowling was in her 40s, Steve Carell was in his 40s, and which makes me feel a lot better because I'm 30.
Yeah, but here's the thing the thing about authors and writers and creatives is the back catalog is what makes you money. Publishers too. Like the more stuff you have, the better, the more you're going to make. Like if you make $100 on your first book, and you make $100 on your second book a month, you make $100 from your third book. By the time you hit 10 books, you'll have $1,000 a month. Yeah. And every time you launch, you'll do better on those other previous books. So you'll do better over time. And it's never that sort of 100 on each book, but over time, you'll make a career because you have enough back catalog. You talked about this earlier about having a bunch of different kinds of content. It's not that I have a different kinds of content. I have different modes of content. So I have things in comic. I have enough that when someone comes to my table, they can find something they like.
Right.
And if they like me and they like the content, then they'll buy something. But I started with one book, and then I got to like 5 books, and then I got to 10 books. And now that I have a bunch more books, there's a bunch more options, because even if somebody really likes a specific kind of content, they may not be in the mood for a psychological mind screw. They may be in the mood for a lighter book or a book about a pickle. Like, just because somebody is me as a human being, I have varied ranges. And one day I may really want to read a book about a pickle. And the very next day I may be in a super massively depressed mood and want to like read a book about a psychopath that kills stuff. And the next day I might, be feeling empowered and want to read a book about a girl who kicks ass. And the same person is in a different mood every single day. And if you can think of yourself as a human being, who, who has different likes and interests, and looking at my shelves over here by my desk, I have a bunch of different varied interest books that all hit me as an interest, but at different times of my day and different times of my life and different times of my week. Right. So I have a bunch of that content, which all is geared towards you as one specific reader, but with the knowledge that just because you like Ichabod Jones Monster Hunter doesn't mean you only like books like Ichabod Jones Monster Hunter.
Right.
I like the regular show. I also like Game of Thrones. Those two things are very, very different shows.
Yes.
But I like them because I'm a human being and my interests are varied. So, by having more stuff on your table, and over time you'll find that like the more stuff you have, the more you sell, because that's how publishers work.
Right.
And writers work.
Cool. Well, so I think we've been we went a lot longer than I expected to. I thoroughly appreciate that you took the time with me. And I'll let you get back to maybe cooling off without a shirt on.
All right. Sounds good, man.
And there you have it, Russell Nohelty. If you'd like to find out more about him, you can go to a variety of places. You can go to russellnohelty.com for more information on his consulting. Head over to Wannabe Press to find out more about his publishing business, or head over to thebusinessofart.us for information on his own podcasting, which is a podcast that I very much recommend listening to. It is packed with some very good information. He also does some very good interviews of other creators and publishers and things like that, with a bit of a slant on the business side of art, hence the title of his podcast. And once again, you can find him on Twitter, Russell Nohelty, on Instagram as Russell Nohelty, and both of those places also as Wannabe Press. And you can find more information about us on Twitter, Indie Comic Ninja or Indie Comic Audio. You can also find us just on our websites, indiecomic.ninja, or just for the show notes, head over to indiecomic.audio/episode 5 for this particular episode. And I think that's it. So, thanks again for listening. I will see you next month with another interview. Bye.